I was running late for a very important dinner. It was my chance to finally meet my fiancé, Michael's difficult and secretive father, Mr. Harrison. On my way, I stopped to help an old man shivering on a park bench in a quiet, wealthy neighborhood. I gave him my only sandwich and my nice wool scarf. The pressure of the evening weighed on me like a physical burden, a heavy, suffocating blanket of expectations that had been building for weeks. I was already flustered and anxious, the weight of a meticulously planned persona pressing down on me, and this unexpected stop had only added to my stress. Every second I lingered on that bench felt like a step closer to failure, yet I couldn't bring myself to leave. The old man's clear, weary eyes held me captive, his need a silent plea I couldn't ignore. When I finally arrived, breathless and late, at the grand estate, my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt a strange sense of doom. The immense mansion, with its perfectly manicured gardens and imposing stone facade, seemed to swallow me whole. I froze the moment I stepped into the room, every frantic emotion draining out of me in an instant, replaced by pure, disbelieving shock. The old man from the park bench was sitting calmly at the head of the long dining table, his clear blue eyes watching me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. A small, knowing smile played on his lips, a secret he was finally ready to share. It was in that moment I understood that the dinner wasn't just a meeting. It was an elaborate and terrifying trap. The invitation had felt less like a cordial request and more like a royal summons. It arrived via a sterile, formal email from a law office, its tone as cold and impersonal as a court order. Mr. Harrison requests the presence of his son, Mr. Michael Harrison, and his companion, Miss Kristen Miller. This was the moment Michael had been hoping for and dreading for 2 long, anxious years. His father was a living legend in the financial world, a man who had built a multi-billion-dollar company from nothing, and then, a decade ago, had vanished from public life completely, retreating into the total seclusion of his vast walled estate. The stories about him were legendary. He was known for being brilliant, eccentric, and incredibly demanding. Michael's older brother had been disowned without a second thought for marrying a woman Mr. Harrison deemed unworthy, and now I was being put to the same test. The weight of our entire future, Michael's inheritance, our shared dreams, rested entirely on my shoulders. I felt utterly and completely unprepared for what was to come. The entire week leading up to the dinner was a blur of panic and tension in our small, cozy apartment. Michael, usually so calm and easygoing, was a nervous wreck. He spent every evening pacing the living room, his hands constantly wringing together. "Kristen," he said one night, his voice full of a palpable, suffocating worry. "This isn't just a normal dinner. My father doesn't do normal. This is a test. Everything with him is a test of character, of worthiness. Our whole future, everything we've planned, depends on him liking you." He handed me a long, incredibly detailed list of rules and talking points. He'd spent days putting it together. "Don't talk about my job at the small charity," he said, tapping a finger on the page. "He thinks it's a waste of time. Don't mention my simple family background. Stick to safe topics like classical art and European history, things he respects." His most important instructions were reserved for my appearance. "Wear the blue silk dress and the scarf I bought you," he commanded, his eyes pleading for me to understand the gravity of the situation. "And for the love of God, don't be late. He thinks being late is a sign of a lazy mind and a lack of respect for his time." I felt like I was preparing for an acting role, a part I was completely wrong for, a persona so unlike myself that it made me sick. I practiced my lines in the mirror, rehearsing polite, meaningless conversation, and made sure my dress and the expensive scarf were perfect, a costume for a life I didn't recognize. My stomach was a tight, painful knot of stress that never seemed to loosen. I was so focused on passing his superficial, impossible test that I almost completely forgot to be myself. I had to become the person Michael needed me to be, a perfect, polished reflection of the woman his father might approve of. I took the train to the exclusive town where his estate was located, trying to mentally prepare myself. Michael had gone ahead to make the final preparations at the house, leaving me to travel alone. The plan was for me to take a taxi from the station, but the stress and anxiety were so heavy that I decided to walk the last mile, hoping the fresh, crisp autumn air would calm my frantic thoughts. The walk was like entering a different world, a bubble of perfect lawns and manicured hedges that seemed to have no connection to the real world I knew. The streets were unnaturally quiet and lined with huge, imposing houses hidden behind tall stone walls and intricate iron fences. I felt like a tourist, an unwelcome visitor in a place I didn't belong. I checked my watch, my mind calculating every minute, every second. I was cutting it close, but I still had a little time to spare. That's when I saw him on a small, well-kept park lawn, a stark contrast to the opulence around him. He was an elderly man, his clothes worn and messy, his face deeply lined with the struggles of a hard life. He was shivering in the cool autumn air, the kind of cold that seems to settle in your bones. He looked utterly lost and completely alone, a forgotten soul in a world that had moved on without him. My first thought, a reflex born of Michael's frantic instructions, was to keep walking. Michael's voice rang in my ears, sharp and clear. Don't get involved. Don't be late. Don't look anything less than perfect. It was a battle between the perfect daughter-in-law I was trying to be and the person I truly was. But then, the wisdom of my grandmother, a woman who had taught me everything that mattered about true compassion, echoed in my heart. The true measure of a person is how you treat someone who can do nothing for you. To hell with the test, I thought, a surge of defiant bravery giving me strength. I knew which voice I had to listen to. I walked over to the bench, my voice softer and more hesitant than I'd intended. "Excuse me, sir, are you all right?" I asked. He looked up, and his eyes, a surprisingly clear, piercing blue, seemed to bore right into my soul. "Just a bit cold, young lady," he said in a low, raspy voice that held a hint of unexpected dignity. "And I missed the lunch service at the shelter." He spoke without a hint of pity, just a simple statement of fact. I looked at the simple sandwich I had packed for myself. It was the only food I had, but the choice was no choice at all. Without a second thought, I offered it to him. "Here," I said, "it's not much, but it's yours." He took it with a quiet, grateful nod. "Thank you, that is very kind." He shivered again, a deep, full-body tremor. On a final, desperate impulse, I took off the expensive wool scarf Michael had insisted I wear, the scarf that was meant to be my armor. "You need this more than I do," I said, gently placing it over his shoulders. He looked at me again, his intelligent eyes seeing right through my carefully constructed facade and into my true character. "You are a very kind woman," he said. I smiled, wished him well, and then, looking at my watch, I realized with a jolt of pure panic that I was now officially, irrevocably, going to be late. I ran the last part of the way, my heart pounding in my ears, the cold air biting at my bare neck. I had failed the test before I had even walked through the door, or so I believed. I had thrown away Michael's meticulously crafted plan, and with it, I feared, our entire future. I had no idea that in my act of disobedience, I had just passed the only test that truly mattered. I checked my watch again. I was 12 minutes late for the most terrifying meeting of my life. The gates to the Harrison estate were huge and intimidating, a monument to a closed-off world and a man who valued precision and control above all else. I pressed the intercom button, my voice a nervous tremor. "Kristen Miller, here to see Mr. Harrison." After a long, silent pause, the heavy iron gates slowly opened, groaning as they did, like the mouth of a sleeping giant. The long driveway was lined with old oak trees, whose gnarled, shadowy branches seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers, grasping at the fading light. At the end, the mansion appeared. It was massive and imposing, a stone masterpiece with dozens of dark, watchful windows that seemed to stare down at me. Michael was waiting for me on the front steps, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. He was perfectly dressed, his suit impeccable, his hair neatly combed, but his eyes were wild with worry. The moment he saw me, his face, which had been a mask of anxiety, turned into a mask of pure, unadulterated anger. "Kristen, where have you been?" he whispered fiercely, grabbing my arm, his grip tight and desperate. "You're 17 minutes late. He hates being late more than anything. This is a disaster. You've ruined everything." "I'm so sorry, Michael," I said, gasping for breath and trying to pull my arm away. "I was walking from the station and there was this old man on a park bench. He was so cold and hungry, I had to stop and help him." Michael stared at me in disbelief, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and betrayal. His face was a mixture of horror and fury. "A homeless man? You were late to meet my billionaire father because you stopped to talk to a homeless man? Are you insane?" The words were venomous, born of his own deep-seated terror. "I didn't just talk," I said, a little more bravely now, feeling the righteousness of my actions. "I gave him my sandwich. He was hungry. I had no regrets about that." Then his eyes fell on my neck, which was bare. The scarf was gone. The last shred of his composure shattered. His face twisted with even more fury, a deep crimson flush spreading across his cheeks. "Where is your scarf? The cashmere one I bought you for this meeting?" I gave it away," I whispered, the words catching in my throat, a sudden wave of sadness washing over me at the finality of it all. He was so cold. "You gave it away?" Michael's voice rose into a choked, angry squeak, dangerously close to tears. "A $600 scarf? To a bum? Kristen, what is wrong with you? This isn't one of your little charity projects. This is my father. He judges everything. And you show up here late without the one expensive thing you were supposed to be wearing, the one thing that was meant to show him you belonged." His words were like a series of small, sharp slaps, not meant to hurt me, but to vent his own primal terror. He wasn't really angry at me. He was terrified of his father, and he saw me as the problem that had just ruined his future. Just then, the huge doors of the mansion swung open with a soft, ominous creak. A tall, thin butler with a face as unmoving as a statue stood there, an impassive gatekeeper to the world inside. "Mr. Harrison will see you now," he said in a monotone voice. Michael immediately fixed his tie and grabbed my hand again, his grip tight and desperate. "Just let me do the talking," he hissed. "Smile, be polite, don't mention the man on the bench or the scarf. Please, Kristen, just try to be perfect for the next few hours." He pulled me into a foyer so big and quiet that our footsteps echoed on the marble floor like cannon shots. The house was not a home. It was a museum of wealth and power, cold and impersonal, filled with dark furniture and priceless, uninviting art. The butler led us down a long, echoing hall to a pair of tall, heavy doors. From inside, I could hear a man's voice. It was a low, raspy voice with a familiar warmth I couldn't place, but my heart started to pound with a different kind of fear, a dawning horror. It couldn't be. The doors opened, and Michael was still whispering last-minute instructions, but I wasn't listening to him. I wasn't looking at the long dining table set for 3 or the huge crystal chandelier sparkling above it. My eyes were fixed on the man sitting alone at the far end of the table, an old man in a worn jacket. It was him, the man from the park bench. My mind completely refused to accept what I was seeing. "It's not him," I told myself, a frantic whisper in my own head. "It can't be him. It's just a coincidence, a trick of the light." But then he moved. He lifted a hand to his neck, and there, draped over the shoulders of his worn jacket, was my cashmere scarf. It was the undeniable proof. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up in a horrified paralysis. Michael, seeing me frozen in place, finally looked down the table and saw his father, not in a perfect suit, but in the same disheveled clothes from the park. His face went pale, a sickening gray color that drained all the life out of him. He looked like a scared little boy who had just been caught in the biggest lie of his life. "Father?" he stammered, his voice a disbelieving squeak. What are you doing? Are you sick? Why are you dressed like that?" The man at the table, Mr. Harrison, didn't answer his son. His clear blue eyes, the very same eyes that had looked at me with gratitude on the bench, were fixed on me with a profound look of respect. He smiled a warm, genuine smile, and the warmth in it was so shocking in that cold room. "Welcome, Kristen," he said, his voice the same kind, raspy one I'd heard an hour before. "Please come in. I apologize for my appearance earlier today. It's an old habit of mine, a way of getting a truer read on people. It seems to have worked perfectly this time." Michael's humiliated whisper broke the stunned silence. The homeless man? That was the homeless man? The horrible realization of what I had done and what he had said to me on the porch now hit him like a physical blow, a crushing weight of shame. He looked utterly defeated, the meticulous persona he had built for me now a pile of ashes at his feet. Mr. Harrison's voice grew cold and sharp as he looked at his son, the smile completely gone. "You look surprised to see me, Michael. You, of all people, know that I value kindness above all else. It is the one true, lasting value in this world. I have spent years testing people to find it, to see who acts with genuine compassion when they think no one important is watching. It is a value you seem to have forgotten in your scramble for power and position." He looked back at me, and his eyes filled with warmth and a deep, quiet admiration. "And then, today, this young woman appeared," he said, his voice now soft again, full of emotion. This young woman who was already late, who knew every second counted, who knew her entire future was being judged, she stopped. She saw a human being in need of warmth, and she sacrificed her own. She sacrificed her lunch, her only meal, so a complete stranger might eat. And she sacrificed her comfort and her expensive scarf, the one you insisted she wear, so I might be warm. He touched the scarf gently, a small, reverent gesture. "She failed your pathetic test of being on time and looking perfect, Michael, but she passed mine, the only one that truly matters. She passed it with flying colors, without even knowing it was happening." He smiled at me again, beckoning me closer. "Now, Kristen, let's have some dinner. It seems we have a wedding to plan and a company to discuss. I want you to be a part of this family and a part of my business, not just a guest." He glanced at his pale, trembling son. "Sarcastic? Michael, you may stay and listen, or you may go. The choice, for once, is entirely yours." The silence in the room was heavy and thick with shame. Michael stood frozen for a long moment, completely defeated, a broken puppet whose strings had been cut. I felt a strange, profound calm as I walked the long, solitary distance to the seat next to Mr. Harrison, the seat of honor, the seat of power. It was a seat Michael had never been close enough to claim. Michael, after what felt like an eternity, slowly took a seat at the far end of the table, as far away from the power and the truth as he could get, a shadow in the corner of his father's magnificent, merciless world. The dinner that followed was a quiet, deep interview. Mr. Harrison ignored Michael completely and focused all his attention on me, as if his son weren't even in the room. He didn't ask about my money or my education. He asked about my passions, my values, and my dreams. I told him about my job at the charity, the one Michael told me not to mention. I told him about my parents, a teacher and a nurse who raised me with love but little money, and he listened with real, genuine interest, asking smart, thoughtful questions. "They sound like good people," he said, a gentle smile on his face. "They raised a remarkable daughter." He even handed my scarf back to me, neatly folded, his touch gentle. "Thank you," he said. "It was a great comfort, and it means much more to me than any fancy suit." It was in that moment, in his quiet words of respect, that I felt truly seen for the first time. When the meal was over, Mr. Harrison walked us to the front door, the impassive butler standing silently behind him, a witness to the unfolding drama. He spoke to his son for the first time that night, his voice quiet but firm and full of a cold disappointment that was more painful than any shout. "You have a remarkable woman here, Michael," he said, his eyes boring into his son's with an intensity that made Michael flinch. Do not make the mistake of underestimating her or her values ever again. Your place in my company is secure, not because of your merit tonight, but because of hers. She is the best part of you. Now go home and be the man she deserves, the man I hoped you would be." The car ride back to our apartment was a long, silent, and heavy one. Michael drove, his face a pale mask of shame and defeat. The air in the car was thick with the things that had been said and the things that had gone unsaid. I didn't feel like I had won anything. I felt like we had both just survived his father's final, devastating test, and only one of us had come out with our character intact. When we were finally back in the safety of our small living room, the shame and fear finally broke. He sat on the sofa and cried, the tears a release of years of pressure, of trying to be the man his father wanted him to be. He apologized not just for his behavior that day, but for his cowardice over the past 2 years, for his desperate need for his father's approval, for trying to make me into someone I wasn't. It was the most honest I had ever seen him, a moment of profound truth that had been hidden for so long. I knew in that moment that our relationship was not over, but just beginning, and that it would be built on a new, more solid foundation of honesty and kindness. Our wedding a few months later was small, quiet, and beautiful, a true celebration of love, not wealth. It was held in the sunny garden of my own parents' backyard, and Mr. Harrison was there. He was not dressed as a homeless man. He was dressed in a simple, well-tailored suit, but around his shoulders, worn like a medal of honor, was my wool scarf. He was no longer the scary, secretive billionaire. He was just my father-in-law, my family. As I stood there saying my vows to Michael, a new, more humble, and infinitely better man, I thought about the nature of tests. I had walked onto that estate terrified of failing Michael's superficial test of appearances. I had failed it completely. But by doing so, I had passed the one test that truly mattered. My victory wasn't in winning a fortune or a place in high society. It was in the quiet and simple knowledge that a person's true worth is not measured by what you own or who you know. It is measured always and only by the kindness you show to a stranger on a park bench when you think no one in the world is watching.